we used an old Rogers kit for this. It's from the 60s. Rogers were an American company. Ludwig, Gretsch and Rogers were basically the main three making good drums at the time that everyone wanted to use. This is a 22 by 14 kick drum, 13 by 9 rack tom and a 16 by 16 floor tom, all in a very fetching champagne sparkle finish, which is one of my favourites. This snare drum here is actually from the 50s. It's one of mine. It's a Ludwig WFL classic Buddy Rich model. So mahogany shell with reinforcing hoops. Sounds great. It's got a nice sort of top end and it cuts through it. A little sort of, we've tuned it quite high with very minimal damping. So it's got some nice sort of overtones that cut through. And a little bit jazzy as well. And then the other snare drum that we used that was particularly useful on some of the sort of more energetic, grittier, later 60s tracks like the Kinks ones and things, was this Ludwig 400, which is a lead alloy metal shell, again 5.5 inches deep. And I always think this is probably the most recorded drum of all time ever. I think. I mean, every drummer ever has one of these in their arsenal. It always sounds great. You can do anything with it. You can tune it up, you can tune it down. It'll sound fat, it'll sound high. I mean, it's the drum to have, really. And we've sampled it loads of times before, but as I say, it's the most recorded drum of all time, so it would make sense for it to be the most sampled drum of all time as well. And obviously having it in a different room with a different miking and a different tuning gives it a different take that we haven't had before, so we thought it was worth doing. And that's the kit. Yes, that's the kit. Mic-wise, we went for a sort of an old 60s kind of miking. They didn't use many mics back then. There weren't many channels on the tape machine. We've got a AKG D19 as a mono overhead, which is pretty standard for then. And then the cymbals are actually Paiste Formula 602, a 20-inch medium ride and an 18-inch thin crash. They're actually modern cymbals, but they started making them in the early 70s, and they're pretty authentically reproduced, and they sound really nice. They're quite sort of thin and not as abrasive as some of the modern cymbals that you get today, not too sort of toppy, very musical sounding. And we've got some 14-inch Zildjian hi-hats as well. Again, quite dark sounding cymbals, nothing too obtrusive, fitting with the sort of the softness of the kit, really. Obviously there were loads of diverse musical styles in the 60s. It's impossible for us on one record to do all of them. So we sort of tried to do a bit of a cross-section, you know, some of the Tom Jones and Dusty Springfield stuff with big orchestral arrangements and quite quiet drumming at the beginning, then moving through to some of the sort of beat groups like the Kinks and the Beatles, a little bit more aggressive. And also some of the stuff that was coming over from America. Obviously you got Booker T and the MGs with that more sort of soul and bluesy influences, and Georgie Fame over here as well. So we sort of tried to get a bit of a cross section of a few different styles, so there was a bit of a take of, you know, just some of the many things that were around at that time rather than focusing on one particular area. So hopefully that'll be useful in using the multi-tracks to sort of write your own tunes. And the other thing we sort of noticed as we were doing it is a lot of the tempos of 60s music are really quite sort of vibrant, quite fast. There's a lot around 150, 160, 170. I mean, even more. It was quite interesting doing it and noticing actually just how fast pop music used to be back then, and how in recent days a lot of the breaks that we've got and grooves that we've got are a lot slower. I mean, a good 50 BPM slower, I would say, than they were back then.
So we're here today in Myloco's Hoxton Square Studios in Hoxton. We're mixing the swinging 60s pop drops multi-tracks that we recorded in the Bridge Studio in Bermondsey just a couple of days ago with Tim Weller. I've got 5 mics that we recorded the kit with. We've got a kick mic, a snare mic, and we had 3 mics placed around the kit. Various different types of microphones. There was a dynamic microphone, a valve microphone, and a ribbon microphone, all placed around different parts of the kit, which each one has a very different sound. So when mixing, you can get a very different sound by just changing the relative balances of those microphones. The main job of today really is just to process the recordings that we already have, the multi-track takes, and then we'll be printing those takes back into Pro Tools. And then those mixes and stem prints will be available to buy in our mix and stem packs alongside the multi-track sessions, which you can buy as well. We'll also be creating some construction loop packs from the stems, the multi-tracks and the mix files, and also just our usual stereo mix loop packs as well.